Today we're doing a all-in-one wet on wet, very wet painting.
Good morning, it's Hazel Jarvis, it's Art Online and it's the start of a new term. We are going to do a beautiful painting of a rooster, wet on wet with lots of luscious paint.
And the beauty of this is there is no waiting time. Hooray! It's just an all-in-one painting.
So I'm going to use my favorite watercolor paper, the Canson Cold Press, very inexpensive. I'm going to use my typical Kuretake paints, and I'm going to use two brushes. I'm going to use the number 2 for the beak. It doesn't have to be a great brush, just has to have a nice point, and one of these nice big museum brushes.
And here is our very handsome inspiration. I would suggest practicing on sketch paper first, and then when you're ready, going on to the good
You want to
watercolor
draw
paper.
very lightly. So I start with where the beak is going to be. I put in the curve of the body, and then I put in the tail. And I'm just going to make that a little bit darker, otherwise you'll never be able to see. So here goes the comb, here goes the beak, here's the body. And you'll want to do much paler than me. And here's the tail. With clean water, you dip your brush into your water pot, and then I'm just going to drip a nice fat drip of clean water onto the paints that I'm going to use. And this just pre-moistens them and makes it much easier to pick up the paint. Obviously, we've got to have some burnt sienna and we've got to have some black at the bottom. And now we're good to go. Take the eraser and I'm just going to lightly just lighten up my pencil lines so they're not too dark. They're really only here to give me a rough guideline. And I want a nice diagonal flow of my cockerel across the page. At this point, you want to clear your head, move the phone out of the room, and ignore everything that comes and interrupts you. So we'll start with some orange for the beak, a nice pointy beak, slightly separate, and a little bit of orange for the eye. We'll move to a red of vermilion, number 31, and stroke that paint on and just hold the brush sideways, press down so that all the paint flows out onto the paper. And then, because this is a really fluid painting, you go straight into the next color, and you can see how wet that is. You can see the paint really flow and bleed, which I love. And you can see from the puddle of water there just how very wet it is. And you want to keep this really wet so that the paint just bleeds all the time and you can go from one color into another. So here's some burnt sienna coming in. We'll switch to periwinkle for the under part. When it bleeds into the brown, it gives a lovely grey. And you can see how nicely this is coming with this big brush. We'll go back to the yellow ochre. Stroke that in. And we're moving into the black. And don't you love the drama of this? So you can't stop now, you just have to keep going. And you can see how nicely the black is flowing into the periwinkle over here. So now maybe we'll just take a little bit of blue or dark green in with our black. Finish off the tail. Just run it off the page like this. maybe some pointy feathers. And just keeping going while everything is still wet, you're going to draw in a nice thin leg coming down like so, and another one at the back. Maybe we'll make those just a little wider. And then I suggest you pull out the colour for the claws. And it doesn't have to be too realistic, you can just suggest them. The area around the head is super wet, so when I put some black on my brush like this, I knock most of it off on a paper towel. So I only have a tiny bit just for dotting in for the eye. And now we have a beautiful, albeit very wet, cockerel. When it's completely dry, you can go back in and erase any leftover pencil lines, and you can add some extra detail if you wish. So by the end, you should have a fabulous rooster, and roosters are just so much fun to paint, and there are so many ways that you can take this one step further.
And of course, I can't wait to see what you do.